So, of course, the speakers can make some points, but if there is anybody in the audience, please raise your hand. And the idea is origins. So, what are the big points in terms of positive or negative legacies of these settlements from different countries? I will stand up, maybe.
Yeah, maybe I would maybe like propose a few categories. Also, like one thing that came up to my mind was if it was an industrial city or not. So maybe we could, like, on one side, on the right, on the left-hand side, we can put like general categories, and maybe like on yeah, exactly, and maybe on the Y axis we can then put the single cases, like, you know, like Y or like X axis is like yes, okay. So Ben, like to the left, or maybe I can write. Yeah, I can try. So. Maybe here we can put the general yes, positives and negatives, and here we can put like the single cases. I think we had 4, no?
4? No, we had actually 6 speakers.
Yeah, but I did general introduction, and then we had like, I think.
Okay, yeah, good. Well,
so, so for me, I think like one of the important aspects was if it was an industrial city or not. Then the second one, if it was like a new town or there was like a historical center connect to it that also like had an influence on the architecture of the city, because then you either had like a central cultural axis or not, or the cultural amenities were in the old center, and then you had just like living quarters. Then I thought what would be interesting is that if it was a prefabricated technology or not, because we heard that in Chargotayan, I think due to the terrain, right? Because you were not able to build these like cranes.
There were smaller factories, but not a big housing factory. It was far away.
Yeah. So if it was like a general prefabricated technology, or if there were like, you know, like modifications to the prefabs. Yeah, and what was the usual square meter area? That was like something that I found like quite interesting. So it would be like, from my point of view, it would be also interesting to hear then to these like different cases, you know, like the answers to this, because maybe then we have like a matrix to draw some conclusions.
Yes, okay. But if we ask the speakers, I ask you to make very short comments, because we still want to have the feedback of the audience. Maybe we can really make it like like a Pecha Kučak kind of style. What do you think was the most positive about your case, and maybe the most negative? Just to start with, because we are looking for positive takeaways and negative, and you have to decide for the most positive and the most negative. I think it's maybe nice to polarize it a bit, and then, of course, Helena, you can write down your general criteria, and in the meantime, we start. Anybody already know the most positive and the most negative? Michal?
In case of Nowa Huta, I would say that the most positive is a very strong self-identity of the space. It came in the 70s and 80s because of the political situation and the strong opposition against the system, especially in the 80s. There were some strong clashes with the police at that time, 82, 83, 84. And until today, there is a sense of some, how to say, self-built environment, which is our one, and this is something that is driving the place very, very strongly in a very positive way. Concerning the negative, I think that there was some sense of loss of development of urban planning. This is the issue of Poland not necessarily of Krakow, but in Krakow it is very visible. And what came next in the 1990s and especially post year 2000 was to a certain extent coming from the strong negation, strong resistance towards the Athens Charter housing. But in fact, the new housing of the last 20 years did not produce this kind of, let's say, values, urban values, that this housing of the 60s and 70s was able to produce. And also in the 80s, we saw the construction of the very negative discourse and language concerning this type of buildings, and we are somehow in this language until today.
It's very difficult, but I think it was a very good point that you made, and I wonder who wants to be next. Who has already? Svetlana, you already know? Yeah. Okay. Most positive, most negative.
Do you see, even positive and negative has two sides of the same coins.
But we try to be black and white.
I cannot really. Do you see? As about Pavlova Polya district, I told about that it was maybe one of the first example of this kind of modern urban planning, and it was very interesting decision for the end of 1950s, one of the first. And the urban value also that the authors of this urban decision include not only this district, but also surrounding of that big green areas, and it was very positive for that district. About negative, do you see? I agree that typical housing section themselves don't have architectural value, and in many cases they should be replaced maybe for a new one, I don't know. But the idea was laid, then this area was designed in 1960s, do you see? It was a real idea to transform it later, do you see? So it is positive, it seems to me, and it is a very interesting idea. It is absolutely another kind of heritage, transforming heritage. And it seems to me we should find another approaches to value it. Do you see? This is our task, it seems to me.
Okay, thank you. Mikola?
Thank you. The negative position, on my opinion, the way of creating new centers, new residential complexes, very often in Soviet Union and Soviet Ukraine, was connected with move of the demolished of historical center of the city. Especially this way was used in eastern part of Ukraine, and every city, big city in eastern part, often was demolished this way. For example, Bakhmut and Mariupol, Izium, Ochtyrka, Sumy, and other, with creating new center with modern buildings, but using the cleaning of the historical planning structure of historical buildings and other. So positive moment, on my opinion, in the massive move for the urbanization of the country, because the very quick creating the districts with many objects for housing, it was a positive moment for country. The country was changed, so it was connected with most level of education and other. So, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nicola.
So would you say that it was like the infrastructure, like building up the general infrastructure throughout Ukraine, like including housing, education?
Yes, and a kind of positive vision. So it was a kind of something happened and people could see it. That's how I interpreted this. Okay, then the audience can already prepare some answers, because we only have Verica and Jerzy to give the positive and negative.
Thank you. Well, maybe to start with the negative aspects, I think maybe that the settlement's lack of resiliency due to when the social system was demolished, the socialist regime was outdated, then these large settlements failed somehow or stopped to develop. And I think there are many positive aspects actually, but maybe to highlight two of them that I already prepared for a conclusion of my presentation, but didn't have enough time. Nowadays we are speaking of ecology, of sustainability, and that's why I prepared this last slide, it was also awareness of sustainable aspects back then, in some other way, and also the topic of participation was included, but somehow participation of the community, not individual participation. And I think those two aspects should be researched broadly in these settlements. And the cultural impact is, I think, large, because even in my family, my 6-year-old son, when we argue and he wants to finish the fight, he said, "Okay, Mom, now we finished. I move to New Belgrade." And I think it is somehow a symbol of progress even now. And there are many cultural aspects that could be developed and could be seen as a positive characteristics of those settlements.
Yeah, thank you, Verica, for making the link to sustainability in the different dimensions of sustainability, and again back to the children. And we listen to Jerzy.
The positive ones in Salgótarján, I think the most positive one that is it was completed, and I think it was a very well-designed city, also in the term of urbanism, and also in regard on individual buildings, because it was quite far away from Budapest and from other centers. There were also much more place for experimenting and using experiment structures or using other type of buildings than the national type design plans or collections. And almost everything was built during these 40 years what was meant to build. Stadium was not built, but every important things are there. I say just shortly a second one. I think the city knows his values, and a lot of some K buildings are listed, are monuments, they do not have funds to maintain them, and the problem will be with the mass housing. So and with the unique buildings, but with the other residential and commercial buildings. What is negative? They have no money because the economic basis is lost. So the industry went down, and this was really utopia, which didn't work well. And since 35 years, the city has not found his economic basis. There is no work.
Yes. Thank you so much. There were some points we had already heard today, but that's good. So there seems to be maybe some truth in it. I would like to address the audience. So is there anybody? I don't know how long the microphone will be. Yeah. Oh, you have another microphone. So I don't know how long the microphone, the cable, is it this one? Which one is it that we use? You have one there. Okay, now I see it. Good, great. So is there anybody? We are looking forward for further comments. There is... I'm
close to the microphone. I'm Zoltán Erő from Budapest. I wouldn't say that there is an issue which is good or bad, but I would like to add one thing, that we have seen quite different spatial organizations. For example, in the Nova Huta first stage, we had a very geometric and a very artistic urban structure. Later on, it was much more free and much more organic towards the environment. On the other hand, in Salgótarján, we had seen this absolutely free, modernistic urban structure, while in New Belgrade, I don't know, there is a strict system of the blocks and a strict grid of the city, forming frames and streets like in an ordinary city. So I think that this spatial composition will become quite important for us in the coming years, what to do, how to handle these questions.
So you mean to analyze the
pros and cons? It is a very important identity of the given places.
As a part of identity also. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's also important, also the spatial density, right, of these blocks and these different formations actually, and how to densify and how closed or open these spaces are, because that has to do then a lot with the identity, how the people feel in these spaces, you know, if it's like slabs that are like endless, or if they form like semi-open like blocks, or how high are these like slabs, because sometimes within the 5 stories you feel better, with 14 stories it's more like, giving you like more like a smaller like idea that you are like overwhelmed with like spatial impression, or if these high rises have like good centers and the point of view and all that. Sorry, Hubert?
Yeah. Okay, so I think that there is a general good point is when we look from the point of view of protection of environment, that this building already exists. So if there is a discussion if keep them or replace them, it is good. And also it is important, I think, in many, for example, in Poland, most people love them, but also in other countries, it is that people feel that it is their place, and so they many people do not want to be forced to move. So it is good to improve the buildings. And among the bad sides, it is the technical question often, also the accessibility for people with limited movement possibilities, but it is generally of the old buildings, so the newer one. So, for example, that in Poland it is common way that we say that it is better than what developers build now, but when we look toward the accessibility, that what developers build now is much better. And also the question which could have both sides, that often it is very schematic, so it is hard to find the way, so it is the bad things for somebody who wants to visit somebody, the friends. But for the people who live in the environment, sometimes it is not bad. And also during the communist time, sometimes it was very good for the in Poland anti-communist opposition, because the secret police, when was coming, was lost, and then the people have seen that there is somebody looking for them and could quickly evacuate. And also the question of the huge amount of green open spaces. It is good for the society of that space. But on the other hand, so on one hand it is good to preserve it, not to make a densification, but on the other hand, this settlement made that bigger areas were occupied and then less left for the free nature. Of course, when we say that compare it with urban sprawl and other things, but generally I think that, for example, in Poland the nowadays approach totally against densification is too far going.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope there are more. Yes, again, a third row. Is somebody over there wants to add something? Not yet.
I would like to add some perhaps a bit utopian ideas about densifying. So first of all, I'm very much against densifying from a aesthetical point of view. It's incredibly beautiful that you have these huge areas where spaces develop. That's my personal and perhaps also scientific, but more a bit personal view to it. That has a lot to do with the identity and what to do with this. What could we gain if we kept this? I think 2 points. I'm a gardener, and I think ecological gardens to put in these spaces would be a very good thing. And I think this out of 2 reasons. First of all, we have to think of biodiversity, because otherwise we will die not of climate change but of the extinction of species. So it is well known that it is easier to make gardens to have multi-species than Landwirtschaft, agriculture. So that should be put into housing estates, that there are a lot of gardens and people are gardening and they are caring for multi-diverse gardening. That's one point. And I had a second point which I found quite interesting. I don't know, I don't see, who was it? I think it was you. Talking about that one of the first ideas in 1923 to build new modern apartments was to have a good hygiene. But we knew that, of course, in those times, this good hygiene led to less people dying. But today we also know that the good hygiene leads to people dying of allergies and not being well prepared for diseases. So if you put in gardens, that was just an idea coming to my head, if you put in gardens and children are playing in these gardens, and also older children, and then they will be well prepared because they will have a lot of contact with a lot of germs. So this is a bit utopian perhaps, but I think it is leading into the direction of that we have to think of how to deal in these settlements with climate change and extinction of species.
Thank you so much. And I think we have two raised... yeah, there's another microphone. Yeah, Ben, you will be next.
Hi, thank you for the reflections. I mean, my name is Samir Christo. I come from Tirana, from Albania. There are so many things to talk about because we are under a rapid urbanization, let's say, since many years. We call it transition. Let's see where it ends. But you know, for the common public living in these post-war, let's say, structures which were not linked to the Second World War actually, were the sense of the dictatorship to present the another modernist view on modernism, let's say, on prefabrication mostly. So it was a technological sense to produce massively prefabricated housing with voluntary work, I have to say. While on our public is not really present the cultural value, the historical value. We recently, I will talk maybe tomorrow about that, but we recently had a law allowing the government to demolish buildings that are more than 50 years old in order to replace them with new. Because the real estate market value is higher in the central areas of the city than investing for infrastructure in other areas. Also, your argument triggered me a lot, because we've seen the last 30 years, so this is a transition period, small gardens, appropriation of the public space, but also of the living space, done much better by locals than done by any plan architect. Not to undermine architects, I'm an architect myself, but the power of that architects have today to bring change, to implement change. And this goes on and on, but I don't want to take time from others. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your comment. So the real estate development also or real estate driven developments as one point. I think Ben, you were the next. The microphone is behind you.
Yes, I just want to add things similar to the point that Roman Hilman mentioned. A few months ago, there was a mid-sized conference about energetic upgrading in the Hansaviertel in Berlin, which is also a large, famous area of this time. And some experts figured out that those settlements are quite well prepared for innovative solutions in terms of energetic retrieval of geothermy and solar energy, because they have the flat rooftops, they have large public open spaces, and I think this is also a chance for revitalizing the large housing settlements to really look at the potential that the urban layout provides for energetic, ecological upgrading and innovative strategies. And this would also be a thing which would serve as a model, not just towards the people who live there, but also towards politicians and towards industry.
Yeah, so that there is a value, even an economic and environmental value in that spaces and in the architectural appearance, so to say. I think we had another, could the microphone reach out to the very end? Or no, maybe you have to come to the front. Yes, join us in the front. Thank you.
So there is, by all those settlements, there is a question of the proportion of the public space. Because comparing to traditional cities where the public space represents among 20% of the total space, here in those areas it's generally over 80. Yeah, and that's really a lot. Yeah, and that is a problem and opportunity at the same time. But the question raised always is, it was done as non-defined space, yeah, and intentionally. The question is if it can remain so, because in many of those settlements, we have experience in Czech Republic specifically that the city who owns the land is not prepared, and there is no way how they can take care properly of that amount of public space. So the question is, are we really prepared to take care of 80% of the public space? How? And if we are speaking about not to add any additional constructions, any additional types of housing inside those neighborhoods, because there are some examples in Europe, specifically in Netherlands, where they have a very good experience with adding another typologies into the modernistic neighborhoods. So if we are saying no, that would be listed, that would be protected, and we would like to keep it as it is it really then the green solution? Because that's public land.
I think Michal wants to answer. I also want to give a short, not an answer, but another comment. I think even if it would be protected, there are always possibilities. We have in German Denkmalpflegeplan, in English conservation management plans, that could also indicate, what is really valued to what degree, and also what is the quality of specific spaces. We have a lot of investigations about how green spaces, and often they were defined in the past, actually. But I will give to Michal at that point. I think there are ways out of that issue.
I want to bring example from my city that sees growing phenomenon of the so-called social gardens. The people from the neighborhood, they can sign an agreement with the city and take responsibility for the management of the space in between of the housing blocks. And this space is being used for the purpose of producing food. Potatoes, maybe not, but tomatoes, yes. Among the others, those gardens plays a very important role in, let's say, social integration. This phenomenon is maybe not the big one, but you can see it growing, and there are more and more of them. They are not met with only positive answers and remarks, but the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years, it started with the pandemic, in fact, can let us observe that the attitude is changing into the more positive one. So maybe this might be seen as a kind of solution. This is one city, but I think that it might be useful for the strategies in the others.
Maybe Lenka wants to comment. Maybe I will only add that also it's a question we discussed it also about if you need a mixture or if you add housing, And of course, I think your point is quite correct. Like, what is the effective amount that you can actually maintain of public spaces, and so that it doesn't get too costly. But yeah, it seems.
Because what you're describing, that was a design of neighborhoods, modernistic neighborhoods in 30s. So those experimental housing in Prague from 30s, they had those private spaces and not really a lot of public spaces. Yeah. And that's very interesting. No, but that's a very important question, and you can't cover, 60% of the space by gardens. We have those experiences, so it exists, but you can't cover by this the whole surface. So what will it be? I think that this question is important. So will it be more compact? Are we willing to allow it, because it somehow also is destroying the modernistic concept that was not meant to be a production area. Yeah, so there's always this question: what will be the balance?
Yes, Robert.
May I? Yeah, I think what we have here in this discussion, like just those three, like the other two came actually in the keynote panel. Now we have that. So I would just take these three examples. So we had this togetherness and beauty, which was taken from these or derived from these Bauhaus ideas. So I was wondering, okay, actually the settlements, they offer, of course, a new understanding, or they demand a new understanding of togetherness. They demand a new understanding of beauty. So our society does not educate actually this probably does not educate this other understanding of beauty or other understanding of togetherness. So it would actually open community spaces, which we lack of in dense inner city quarters. Everybody in inner city quarters says, oh, we step each other on our feet, we need more space for kids, for this, for parking, for sports, for whatever. So, well, we have this demand and we have this potential. So it's the same principle with the agriculture. You know, we say, okay, this urban gardening, you know, it's all bullshit. What's happening here on dense streets where cars passing by, and so where should we really make productive green really working without being just like a cipher for something? Of course, it would be possible when you have this space in these areas. Again, like demand and potential. So, but I think, and that's good what you said, it's not so easy. So the formula is not so easy. It's not potential, demand, equal success or something. So I don't know how, because like all this happens, you know, when there's another example here in Halle, which actually no one talks about, but actually the Shrinking City project was not about Halle-Neustadt, it was actually about that part. It's Halle-Silberhöhe, somewhere in the south. And there actually they had this idea, okay, there was this high vacancies, even higher than in Halle-Neustadt. And they were tearing down so much, and they were planting trees. So the image was, well, this is a forest with certain houses in between. The images look marvelous, you know, the idea sounds wonderful. But actually we should do a conference about Halle-Silberhöhe, not because there's really the problems, where the problems live. But not saying that, I'm over-exaggerating that a little bit, but I just want to say that, well, there have been already these concepts, you know, doing that simple formula. In Germany, it's Milchmädchenrechnung, yeah. But I just want to say, like, it's very hard to be, like, first derive those potentials, you know, compare them to demands, but then probably do not the first possible shot to produce a solution. I don't have the solution. I just want to say that it's probably this considerative, analytical way how to deal with these potentials and face them against to these demands. And what's next, probably we will figure out during the next 2 days, or this 2 days. Thank you.
Yes, I think, Robert, you are right. We cannot solve it now. And I think we also have to really consider the diversity of the different settlements. We heard that in the beginning, there are different spatial concepts, there are different times. I just know relatively good the New Belgrade cases, and there was a lot of public space that was dedicated for schools, for kindergarten, for different aspects. And of course, the question of how is it managed, that was also mentioned, is an important one. Yeah, so we cannot say that there is a lot of space. There is not a concept how to manage it. So it's about the organization. It's about the governance of these areas. And I think it's less a problem of the green and the amount of the green, but it's a question of the social and political organization of the residents and the society in general. But I wanted to mention one point. We forgot to ask Helena about her positive and main negative aspects, because you were a speaker too.
I think that it's always this thing between the vision and the reality. I think it's not about positive or negative. I think Robert mentioned these limits of these images, that you somehow project a vision, but then there have to be like individual answers to the vision. And you can't just like say generally we apply it through like this copying paste method, you know, which we saw maybe like some general principles are similar, like this transformation of this like prefab that like Mrs. Geiwitz also said, yeah, we can do like this like central heating transformation, and you can like generally like transform the housing plans and all. But there is also always like individual topography and everything. So yeah, but maybe like each of the settlements needs a specific vision and not a general one.
Yeah, but also, Helena, I wanted to ask you about the positive and negative aspect of your case. In particular,
yeah, that was what I was trying to actually suggest, that this one has to use this image-making potential, but it has to be shaped individually based on a single location.
Good. But I wanted to add another point, which I think is related to, this aspect of program and media, because it was also Jerzy who talked about the book that made the residents proud. And the role of, sometimes I think, oh, there are so many books written already. On the other hand, we see that people might feel valued when they are shown in a movie or in a book or in an exhibition, something like that. So this role of dissemination, of documentation in different ways, which I would like to add as a positive point to the list.
Sorry, just one comment that in Hungary we are lacking of such books. So we do not have a lot of books. We do not have a lot of conferences. We do not have a lot of talkings about these cases. So that's why it's really, really important to talk and to give information about these kind of projects to the people who are living in these cities. And I think one side, the scientific work is also really important, but on the other side also this publication for the wider publicum is also really, really important.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that difference, that it is not everywhere the same and the same availability of material. I think, well, we are running a bit, I see already Robert looking at me, it's 3:30. So we are actually in the last minutes of our discussion. But there was Ben who wanted also to say something next to Robert.
I also wanted to say
something. And Robert also wanted to say something, yes.
I just wanted to take on this topic. What we clearly saw in this movies, and especially also in the comparison of both of the movies, we had this in the preparation talks about that. Actually, when we talk about now this topic again, especially when we talk about the origins again, so also like our motive for these conference represents first of all the origins. So we were wondering what kind of aesthetic do we want to reproduce? Is the aesthetic understandable? Will it be misunderstood? Because we read it differently. I found it. Of course, over time we read it differently, like connotations change and so on. But I found interesting now, seeing this first movie, it made a huge difference in terms of it was a color movie. It was no black and white movie. The first movie was colored, the second one was black and white. So you see that, especially also when you see movies of the Second World War or whatever, and suddenly, or they afterwards color those movies, they feel more present. So that I found very interesting, and that's just like maybe aesthetical cipher to understand what I actually want to take on. And also, like, it was interesting that there were protagonists in this movie. So it was like this typical Aufbau aesthetic, these construction aesthetics. But then there were certainly introduced, this boy, So it was personalized. So it reminded me of another movie, which is completely unrelated to the topic. So that's why I'm not saying. But it was personalized and somehow it worked differently. It's just two examples. Probably what can make a difference. And then I think these narratives. They were for me more understandable. Like that's for sure. And I think that these narratives actually have high value, what are connected with them, but we do not understand them probably. But, of course, we also have to produce now also narrative legends. For example, I found it interesting, who had the summer, winter, spring quarters, And that's very up to date. Whenever there's a new development, no Platte, no nothing, some Fellini courtyards or whatever, that could be taken from now, a marketing, it's the ice, fire, water, earth, or the whatever. So you see that there will always be like implemented or sometimes also like retrospective, there's implemented a legend. That's actually the ABC of real estate marketing. So so to say. So that's just some knots, some loose ends of some strings, what I'm sketching. But I think that whenever we see developments or redevelopments of those new towns or large housing, we see there will be implemented some new legends. They will be overlaid probably over those old legends or narratives. So the question is there a potential in developing or continuing that narratives? Can we continue those? Because nothing, what we do now there seems so shiny, so bright, so strong, so new as these movies or as these pictures from that time when we really try to understand them. So that would be a question, because I think there's a strong, let's call it marketing potential, which is not used because we forget about it and then we try to artificially, or housing companies try to artificially implement some new stories. Can we somehow catch up with the old stories, which probably are still the newer and the stronger and the more progressive ones as these nowadays contemporary stories, because sometimes they seem to me more old-fashioned and more, compared to what was this bright and new and strong image we had in those days. So the past is more progressive than the present.
I think we had Ben and then Jerzy, and this would maybe be the last comments before we close the session.
It's maybe not very surprising, but a quite similar point like Robert mentioned. I was also impressed by the first movies because they have a strong visual way to transform and to communicate the values of modernism. And I think that we need to take up this tradition of telling the values in a less academic, in a stronger voiced way, and perhaps we can add on in the other sections about public awareness and civil engagement, because I think I also like the idea of the social gardens. It would be good to have civil participation, ask people what are the values you are now missing or having or appreciating living in this area, and compare them with the visual vocabulary back then and the communication strategies, and then probably come to a kind of update of telling the stories of the advantages of such large housing estates. I think this is also a thing where we can find a lot of inspiration in looking at the modernism of the 20s as well as of the 50s and 60s.
Okay, and then final statement, Jerzy.
It's a big responsibility, but
big responsibility.
They are just also. No, I think these utopian things, these films, they were basically lies. So I do not think that we need such lies today. We are suffering these times now. We are organizing such conference because we do not know what to do with this huge amount of values or misguided utopian things. So I don't. Personally, I do not want such an era with such big ideas, and they had the means to realize it, and the results are not very impressive.
I just wondered. I think I produced a misunderstood. This was no normative judgment. It was just a methodological. It's just comparing marketing with marketing.
I mean, well, maybe that would make sense. Like one can, of course, use like visual film material, but you have to also be aware that like some films are documentaries, some are semi-documentaries, and some were really like propaganda or like a direct commissioned for political purposes, you know. So like even in this like historical material that like Ben was referencing, one would have to also do some research to what extent and with which commentary you actually use these images.
Okay, so Robert, is the coffee ready? Good. The coffee is ready. That means that we can continue the discussion with a coffee and probably a cake.